Hi, this is ENT 11 for Friday, May 11th. Today on ENT, we have the CODIs being announced in EdTech. We have news from K-12 and higher ed with top majors for upcoming graduates 10 years from now. We have risk-based student loans. We'll be talking about Spanish students striking. We have problems around the world, actually, when it comes to student debt. And we have a student science report card for 8th graders that, well, it's not good. So join us for cheery news today on ENT.
This is ENT, the Ed News Ticker for Friday, May 11th, 2012. ENT is brought to you by Udemy. Udemy enables anyone to build and take courses online. Their goal is to disrupt and democratize education by enabling anyone to learn from the world's experts. Visit udemy.com and follow them on Twitter at Udemy. As always, we thank them for their support of ENT. This is ENT. I'm Kirsten Winkler.
And I'm Christopher Dawson. So this week in tech, the CODIs for education were released. The CODI Awards were announced this week by the Software and Information Industry Association, or SIIA. This year they include new subcategories in education with differentiation between K-12 and higher ed. Faring well were Pearson, McGraw-Hill, BrainPop, and several others. You can check out the complete list at the link that we'll post on ENT.
I wonder where we're sleeping with EduQuest or ENT or C12. So anyway, next year.
Definitely.
Okay, in K-12 and higher ed, we have a story from Forbes about the top majors for the class of 2022. Wow. I wish I had that crystal ball, like Alex Knapp. So he looked into his crystal ball and gives some fictitious, of course, advice to college majors of 2022. His top majors of the future are math, robotics, agricultural engineering, hospitality management, health and biotech, pre-law with focus on elder law, quantum engineering, 3D printing, and liberal arts. You can read the reasoning behind his picks, of course, over at Forbes. Wow, the liberal arts.
yeah, and 3D printing. Right.
And 3D printing will be a major on its own, yeah.
Actually, that's not too far-fetched. Nothing there that's too wild. But the 3D printing actually catches my eye.
Yeah. You will be you will need to have a major for that.
Yeah, I mean,
for your makeup on.
Right. As it stands right now, it really requires some technical skill. I don't know if we'll need a whole major by that time. It'll be an associate's degree in 3D printing. Anyway, so economist Michael Simkowitz has suggested we use a risk-based system for student loans. Here in the States, certainly student loans are sort of on everybody's mind, and they've become quite an election issue, among many other things. So he published a paper in the Social Science Research Network and suggested the use of risk-based student loans. Those students entering high-value majors would receive a lower interest rate than those pursuing underwater basket weaving with a minor in dance. My words, not his. STEM graduates, therefore, who will be best able to pay back their loans most likely, will be paying the least, while others who are less STEM inclined would essentially be penalized just as those with poor credit scores are penalized on home mortgages and car loans. There's a little split here.
I have a bad, weird feeling about that. Who decides what's a valuable degree and then not? And of course, at the moment, we are very STEM focused, so we are already not neglecting, but putting less emphasis on, the liberal arts, languages, and so on. And who knows, in 10 years, maybe, I already somewhat seeing the writing on the wall that we will have a shortage in areas we don't focus on currently, and I have very mixed feelings about this.
I do too. I know we need to revamp our student loan system, but I think it was the EdSurge newsletter. They said it's the not so invisible hand, maybe sticking its fingers in a little too much. So we'll see if that gets any traction. I can't imagine it will, since no one seems to have any solutions to get any traction at this point. But interesting thoughts, at least.
Next story is from the LA Times. Half of college grads working full-time with less pay and deep debt. So related to the previous story. For most recent college graduates, these are gloomy times. Only about half are working full-time, with the majority starting with less pay than expected. I'm not surprised here. While also dealing with huge student debts. Nearly 6 in 10 think they'll end up less financially successful than their elders. It's a pessimistic outlook from the subjects of a study from Rutgers University, which this spring surveyed hundreds of people who graduated between 2006 and 2011. About 12% are under or unemployed. Many of the rest are volunteers and then in the military or still in school. So workers who graduated during the recession from 2009 through last year earned a median starting salary of $27,000 to around $3,000 less annually than earlier graduates. And nearly a quarter of all respondents said their current job pays much less than they'd anticipated. Female graduates earned $2,000 less than their male counterparts. So definitely some interesting figures here. Well, we know this difference between men and women still, which is a little bit obnoxious, at least surprising, but yeah, also less than they anticipated. Of course, I always think that college, university is very important, but sure, for some jobs and seeing where some graduates end up, you can start asking the question, so what did you go for college for?
Yeah,
so,
what's the value? I mean, I think we can agree there's value, but it certainly really does beg the question, are there alternatives that don't land you in so much debt and that maybe actually get you a job that's related to your skills and your experience and not that major that's going to cost you more in student debt. So, interesting. So here's a story from rawstory.com. The Spanish students strike over the education crisis. So not just here in the States. Spanish students took to the streets.
We have the crisis everywhere.
Took to the streets Thursday in anger at crisis cuts in education, the first in several days of broader social protests across the country. The National Students Union called demonstrations in more than 50 towns. Its leader, Tohi Delgado, told the AFP, predicting that thousands of students, pupils, and teachers would join in despite the looming exams. As Spain fights to stabilize its public finances, schools and universities have for months been complaining of shrinking budgets for research and extra work for teachers. Since the last student marches in February 29, the government has announced a further €3 billion in cost-cutting reforms, expanding class sizes and raising university fees to an average of €1,500 from €1,000. So,
doesn't sound a lot when you put it in relation with what you guys pay in the States, but for us so far, education and also higher education in most countries, with except some elite schools, but has always been free. And also when you see particularly Spain, also some other European countries are in a very deep crisis, and you have up to 50% youth unemployment, or young people, including graduates. So it's really a very somber situation. It's really,
right.
Okay, it's our Forbes day here. Next story also comes from the magazine. Getting a job washing cars is harder than getting into Harvard. Okay, Cheery is a service that sends you a car washer within 20 minutes, usually 20 minutes. This means that the app company has a labor-intensive service attached and needs unskilled labor. There are many others, such as we all know Uber and Zarly, whose success will benefit low-skilled workers more than MBAs or BAs. The hitch is that right now, despite all these out-of-work people with only high school degrees, the odds of getting a job at Cheery to wash other people's cars on the street is harder than getting into Harvard. It's a demand squeeze. Cheery's founder, Travis van der Zanden, has so many job seekers wanting to wash cars that he accepts only 1% of who apply. Harvard's acceptance rate is 6%. This won't be the case for long if Cheery and other companies like it succeed, of course. But, wow.
Boy,
hard to get those really mini jobs and increasing competition. So, yeah, everybody is, almost desperately, apparently,
seeking jobs. No, it's true, and there's a feature on NPR just recently about folks using various sites like Craigslist, but they've evolved now into job posting sites, and actually being able to make a tolerable living as unskilled laborers, for hire, but running into problems with all sorts of insurance issues and a variety of barriers to actually being able to make money in a free market economy.
I recently watched an interesting interview with the founder of TaskRabbit, and when it comes into insurance, it's definitely complicated. So I think that's why they are rolling out this service as promising as it is, but rather slowly, and to make it really secure and sure what they are doing and that they are up to something.
Up to snuff, right?
Yeah.
So, on to the 8th graders. They got their science report card. It's not an F, but it's hardly an A+. The science results of the 2011 National Assessment of Educational Progress were released Thursday, and they show that the average 8th grader's science score was increased 2 points from 150 in 2009 to 152 in 2011. Now, as a former teacher, and by my reckoning, since the possible score is 300, that is, in fact, an F. Even the 152, still an F in my book. But the lowest possible score was 0, so there's the bright news. These gains are encouraging, according to David Driscoll, chairman of the National Assessment Governing Board, but the racial and gender gaps show a cause for concern, he said in a statement. The board sets policy for the NAEP. The test assesses public and private school students' knowledge of physical science, life science, and earth and space sciences, and the results are based on a sample of 122,000 students. LA Times also gives us that story.
Yeah. Well, the teacher was speaking, I think. The word is clear.
Well, no punches there.
All right. The Washington Post reports that D.C. is cutting school libraries. At a time when D.C. public schools is pushing hard on literacy education to increase the number of students who can read proficiently, officials are proposing to cut funding for dozens of school librarian positions for the 2012-2013 academic year as a cost-cutting move. Under the proposed changes, schools with under 300 students will no longer have a librarian position funded from the DCPS budget. There are nearly 50 of those schools, quite considerable. Also, funding for librarians in schools with more than 300 will be shifted into a category that gives principals leeway on spending priorities, meaning they can decide not to have a librarian. And what do you say, Chris? How many principals are going to
They're going to choose not to have a librarian, yeah. There was a move for quite a while in the States towards these neighborhood schools. You get small schools which serve a neighborhood, which is nice in principle, but actually kind of stinks in terms of teacher professional development and professional learning networks, and certainly the economies of scale. So I'm hoping that what this in fact does is push schools to merge, and instead of just cut librarians. But there are a lot of neighborhoods that fight very, very hard for their neighborhood schools, and will sacrifice these silly librarians in favor of them. So. We'll see. So Argentina, though, will try to double the number of engineering graduates. I hope not through low-cost student loans. An educational stimulus program launched in Argentina is aimed at doubling the number of engineering graduates by 2021 in an attempt to fill unmet growing demand from the industry. The goal set by the Strategic Engineering Plan, drafted by the Education Ministry and the Federal Council of Deans of Engineering faculties, confetti, is to increase the average annual number of graduates from around 5,000 today to 7,500 by 2016 and 10,000 by 2021. That's on IPS News. And, I think Argentina is one of many countries that is looking to really sort of meet its own needs internally, as opposed to having people come in.
I think so. They are showing actually much stronger than France, for instance, signs of socialism, and I don't know if their president doesn't go bear with me, no political statement here, but won't go too crazy. But I think they're definitely looking how to solve their challenges or issues within their own, amongst their brainy people or with their own industries, and yeah.
Absolutely. Well, there you go. And that closes this episode of ENT, and it closes this week. You will find all the links to the articles we covered on EduQuest. Just go to eduquest.com/ENT11. Also follow the EdNews Ticker on Twitter at EdNewsTicker to stay updated during the week. You can also help us with the show. Go to our new subreddit at ednewsticker.reddit.com and submit your own articles or vote and comment on those you want us to discuss during the week. ENT will be back on Monday. Until then, have a great weekend, everyone.
Yeah.